Hello, LinkedIn, for another great session as a follow-up from Makers and Movers last week. We will do a LinkedIn Live today with two great speakers. I think a lot of you listened to the O9 presentation, to Stephan's presentation and panel last week. A lot of good feedback because it was a highly practical and very straightforward application of how O9 as a software works. So Stephan is back today. Welcome, Stephan. He's going to share together with Knut. Firstly, short introduction. Sorry, I jumped into it, so I got overexcited. So Stephan is the Executive Vice President, go-to-market activities. Basically, he's in charge of everything related to go-to-market for O9 globally. As you all know, O9 is the leading integrated business planning platform. Simply put, the digital brain of your business. They work with top 100 companies worldwide, helping them achieve better performance. So Stephan, welcome. Thanks for joining again.
Hey, thanks, Rado. Looking forward to the discussion. And Knut, good seeing you. I look forward to a good discussion here. And welcome, everyone. Looking forward to seeing some comments and questions too.
Yes, and then Knut Alicke, who is a partner at McKinsey. All of you know McKinsey, of course, and Knut is their leader for the manufacturing and supply chain. He advises clients on a variety of topics, including supply chain management, digital supply chain analytics, supply chain transformations, and is also a visitor professor of supply chain at the University of Cologne. So Knut, pleasure to have you with us again.
Thanks a lot for having me, and looking forward to an excellent discussion with you and with Stephan.
No choice. When Stephan is involved, it can only be quality. So first question, can you tell us a little bit about more machine learning, artificial intelligence use cases that are driving value? This is at the core also at O9 and how the platform is built. So maybe let's open up with that, Stephan.
Yeah, sure. I think maybe we discuss three use cases that are applicable, I would say, across industry verticals, and three use cases across the value chain. A very common one that we are seeing steep demand is machine learning techniques for forecasting. There's a lot to do about this, but really to simplify that and to explain, where's the value is a lot of companies today are still forecasting based on what they sold in the past. Coming out of a year or a year and a half with COVID, right? That will not replicate itself in the same way that it did the past 18 months. Just relying on historical trends is risky. And what we are seeing, those companies are experiencing low forecast accuracy, but also they're getting surprised by changes in demand all the time. So the question is how to solve for that. It's not just the ML part. I think the first thing is about understanding what is driving your demand, right? So if I am a CPG company selling into retail, let's say I'm selling food and bev, then what are the drivers of demand are, my promotions and my pricing and my brand awareness and so forth, but also what's my competition doing, and why is a consumer going to the store buying my product. So there's a lot of those kind of drivers that we can collect now and use. If I am a supplier to the automotive OEMs, let's say I am selling whatever part for engines, right? What is driving the demand? That is obviously the signal that I am getting from the OEM. But what is then driving the demand at the OEM side, right? It's the number of cars that people are buying. What is driving the number of cars that people are buying, right? Could be interest rates, it can be, multiple things, right? So what we really need to do is, before we talk about any of the ML, right, is start figuring out what drives your business and start collecting what we call the leading indicators of demand. Now, the moment we have those leading indicators of demand, right, we can now use them, different machine learning techniques, right, to then ultimately boost forecast accuracy. Are we done the moment we have collected leading indicators and use ML algorithms? No. The next step that we need to do is to make sure that people do not consider the ML to be a black box, right? Because that's often the issue. And then users will never adopt. They say, oh, great that you predict, 102. Well, I was thinking 98, and here's my rationale for it. So in order to say that 102 makes sense, right, we need to provide visibility to why the machine is coming up with 102, right, in this example. So that means that you need to give visibility to what is actually driving the demand, but then also allow people to run different scenarios. So if I change, for instance, my investment into the channel, or if I change the characteristics of my marketing activities and I rerun the ML, then I want to see the scenario comparison, right? So now I get then a good sense of what's driving my demand. That's not only useful for the forecast by itself, but also then can feed back to the sales organization, right? So that they can actually focus on what drives demand. Now, that's one use case. We see other use cases, but maybe Knut, you want to give your perspective on that as well before I continue talking about some of the other use cases that we are seeing.
Sure. So let me build on what you already explained. In our experience, it is super important that not only the forecast accuracy is improved, but this is also then used in an end-to-end way. To give you an example, so we have an accuracy and we improve the accuracy by 15 percentage points, 20 percentage points, whatsoever. So we are super happy, right? Now our supply chain is much better and is much smoother. But unfortunately, our inventory policy does not take into account forecast accuracy. So guess what? Nothing will happen. So guess what? The availability will still be poor because our inventory policy does not reflect the better forecast, right? So that is something that is super important, and it's often overlooked, that people concentrate on, hey, we need to improve forecast accuracy, and that will solve everything. It will solve world hunger, right? No, it will not. It's only one part, and then we need to apply this to the end-to-end supply chain. So we need to consider it in our setup, and we need to make sure that we also work with it. So that's one comment. Stephan, you triggered another thought on the black box. That is a super important element why ML is not used to the extent it should be used. What we often see is that there is a new algorithm. We like this new algorithm, the geeky people, and it even improves, right? But then the planner does not understand what's inside the box, inside the black box. So we, so to say, need to open the black box. We need to make it visible. We need to make it transparent, and we need to understand what is happening. So we need to do a couple of things. We need to make sure that we improve the capability of the planner, that the planner understands at least a little bit what's going on. We need to create confidence that we show, hey, what's going on. And then at some point in time, we might even have something like a TÜV or so to basically assess an algorithm and then say, hey, that algorithm works. Because honestly, I don't know exactly how my car works inside, right? But I sit in my car and I drive, right? And I don't want to understand every nitty-gritty detail, but I use it, right? And similar things, ideally, we have also for the ML algorithms. So
yeah, but then
into the next.
I think, Knut, the moment you step in your car, right? You're driving. Let's say you drive to Amsterdam, right? To visit me here. You would use Google Maps, right? Now, and that is really, I think, an AI use case we are all using in our daily lives, right? And it will reroute you because there might be traffic jams or whatever. To your point, you don't necessarily need to understand every detail of the algorithm, but you want to understand the output, which is, why it is rerouting you, because there is traffic jam. You can clearly see that, right? So you trust the recommendation. So it's providing that visibility. I think that's key. I think, Knut, you mentioned something else, which is very important. You said there might be this new algorithm out there. And I think this is very important, is that in the past, Radu, if you think about how companies have used, algorithms, right, is that there is a software company, and the software company says, I have 5 algorithms, and you pick and choose. And normally you can use all 5 of them, and depending on which delivers the best result, you use that. Then there is another set of companies that said, wait a moment, I know that Knut has a very smart team, and they have developed some algorithms. So can I use those? Obviously, you can use them, and then we can, have fantastic results. But now the question is, there is this sort of continuous improvement in terms of the new algorithms that are coming, on the market, and we see that all the time. The R library, where we find a lot of the algorithm, is open source. right? Then there's a lot of companies that do a lot of work in Python or solvers, new solvers being developed in Groby and so forth. So I think what's very important to understand is that ultimately, right, looking at algorithms is sort of going to the Apple store, right? And you pick your apps, you pick your algorithms, and then you need to test them. So I think when you think about sort of technology that enables you to be future-proof, right, has to be open and integrate with that new world of algorithms and solvers and so forth that's becoming available. I think, Radu, the other example that I would give, right, on the ML use cases is around data. And Knut and I face it every day, right? We talk to organizations and they say, look, what you're talking about sounds great, but my data, forget about it, right? I'm not ready for this. My data is poor. I don't even have my master data clean, right? And that's actually true for 99% of the organizations that I've seen, right? So think about lead times, routings, bombs, not even the external data sources, right? Just the core of what's sitting in your ERP system. And I think what we are seeing more and more is ML use cases that we can use to cleanse master data. So for instance, I can connect to all my transactional data, potentially even real-time data sources, to start cleansing lead times. Hey, in the system it's 5 weeks. We know that in essence, in reality, it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks. But now, the moment I continue to feed the machine with real-time insights on, for instance, incoming shipments, based on the root causes of delays, I can now even start predicting, right, what the lead times will be in the future. And I think that is a very useful example, right, where solving the data problem is now something that we can do with ML as well. And that is a huge enablers for organizations to get and to become ready for transforming how they do planning today. Because by the end of the day, if your planning parameters and lead times and everything is out of sync, you're in a firefight mode by definition.
And Stephan, if I just build on this, if you think about predicting the expected time of arrival, just think about the recent example where the Suez Canal got blocked,
yep.
Right? If it's like a huge disruption like this, or it might also be a small disruption where you say, hey, I'm 1, 2, 3 days late just because of weather. So predicting the expected time of arrival is super, super important. And here again, to connect this delay then with alternatives is super important. So to know that, hey, this vessel is late, that does not necessarily help you, because you need to understand, how does my inventory behave, right? Is my inventory affected? Is my assembly line affected? Do I not have enough components? Do I maybe need to expedite from the port to my assembly line to make sure that I don't have a stoppage? All of this, to put this into perspective, and then to, so to say, pack up the bill of material and the supply chain is super important. And with this, you improve the overall system's performance.
Yeah, and I think, Radu, that is super interesting, right? The data is becoming a commodity. Other use case we are seeing, right? There's companies, they're putting embedded software, IoT in the end device, whether it's capital equipment, toothbrushes, tires, doesn't really matter. The IoT device or the embedded software in the end product is able to give you real-time insights in, product performance, in product usage, and so forth, right? So what we are, for instance, seeing in the medical world, right? There are companies that are selling the big, medical machines to hospitals, right? But all of those machines are currently embedded with a bunch of, IoT sensor data. And what many of those companies have done, they have transformed the business model to like a printer, right? So they sell the machine, and then as part of the machine, you have a lot of different parts and accessories. The moment you put an IoT device where you connect the part, right, you can now get real-time insights on the consumption of that part. But then there are regulatory constraints, right, that in one country, you need to replace that part after 30 surgeries. But, in another country or another state in the US, right, that might be after 45 of them. So the moment you have real-time insights on the number of surgeries per week, you have the most recent lead time of the part, right, and you have the regulatory constraints, then it's pretty simple. You can just replenish, based on those parameters to the hospital, and you can actually optimize, an entire process and revenue stream. And this is medical world, right? But we see this across the board, across industries, that we need to start rethinking the use cases, because companies have become very smart in connecting the entire value chain. And obviously, it's an interesting environment to be in right now.
I want to also open a different angle. I think, Knut, you opened this up also on your LinkedIn recently on the supply chain as a service, and that's an interesting concept. It has been discussed in the past. Not well, or some companies say that they do it. So let's talk a little bit about that. And you got quite a lot of reactions as well, Knut. So maybe share more.
Yes, and it's a concept that basically, looking back, I put into a keynote that I delivered some 10, 12 years ago or so, where we thought about supply chain 2020. And back then it felt like, hey, this is the future, right? So in 2020, then everything will work. And now it's 21. And we thought about, hey, we have a lot of outsourcing in physical flow. So transportation is more or less 95% outsourced. Warehousing, there is a big chunk that is outsourced. Sometimes it's only labor, sometimes it's the full warehouse, sometimes it's even postponement or kind of localization, a little bit of assembly. At the same time, when we discussed with our clients, we saw a lot of immature planning setup. And that is from the processes, from the IT backbone, the capabilities of the people. So now the question is, isn't there someone out there who can do that better, right? So basically has the right IT backbone, has some solutions like O9, has the right planning intelligence in place. And with this basically puts everything together and offers this as a service, so to say, right? And back then, 12 years ago, I tested this with a couple of my clients, and everyone was, the reaction was always the same, was like, oh no, we cannot outsource planning. And then the discussion was always like, okay, but you're not good at planning, so you're not mature. No, we are not mature. So why not finding someone who is better, who is the expert? No, we cannot do this. And this is also a bit reflected in the LinkedIn discussion. That is quite interesting. There's basically a camp that says, hey, no way that we can outsource planning because it's a core of the company. And I would fully agree that this is right. And then there's a camp saying, yes, but come on, planning is going to be much more commoditized. So why not outsourcing? And then there is also another aspect to it. Planning is complex and it requires capabilities and it requires a backbone. So why not making sure that we have this in place, that we even consolidate it in a planning hub, where we then also don't face the challenge that, hey, there is someone in dispatching that is working like a 1.6 FTE, and whenever this person is on vacation, everything breaks apart. Why not having this combined in some kind of planning hub where we kind of have the economies of scale, economies of scope, where we have the capabilities in place, and then really offer this as a service. So the idea, I feel, gets traction nowadays. And I'm super excited about it because I think that will help a lot of companies to significantly improve their planning performance. But that does not help, right? So it only helps if it improves their service level to their customers, right? And if it helps them to improve their supply chain performance. There's just one drawback that it needs to be very, very clear that there needs to be some decision rights, or it needs to be kind of combined with, kind of blended into the organization. That, for example, there is still the S&OP facilitator, often the supply chain manager, the head of supply chain, uses, so to say, this outsourced service to kind of prepare everything, but then the decision is taken within the company, for example, on allocation, right? Or change of portfolio, or any kind of other decision that is taken in the S&OP process. And then it's a super interesting concept going forward.
Yeah, and I think, Knut, maybe the problem that we've seen, right, is that it's often considered to be outsourcing. And I think outsourcing is maybe the wrong sort of description of what it is, right? Because in essence, you're not outsourcing anything. You're actually getting a service that provides you with, better visibility, better capabilities, and improved decision making. And yes, I absolutely agree. I think there is a huge opportunity for a lot of organizations that have tried to improve planning over the past 10, 15, 20 years, but have not seen significant improvement. And I think, Radu, that's what we are seeing across the board, right? A lot of companies, the improvement that you see every year is like marginal, right? So the question is, okay, then, how do you actually improve that significantly? And that's where I think the planning as a service is a super interesting new concept.
But okay, planning as a service versus supply chain as a service. I mean, in my mind, is different. So planning is one. Let's say the first step. If you think from a framework of supply chain being plan, procure, make, deliver, so you have 4 pillars. Planning is number one, and it is crucial and important because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? Absolutely. But then you have 3 other big chunks. So I guess that's where maybe it would need a little bit more introspection. Maybe it's planning as a service. Then I think it's more feasible as a first step rather than supply chain as a service. Anyways, over to you, Knut. You coined you started the term. So.
Yeah, and it's a good push, Radu, right? So indeed, I was thinking much more along the lines of Stephan that all the planning tasks, we clearly have the physical flow, right? So we have the distribution and so on, but this is something where you can buy services, and these services are reliable. So I was thinking more about the overarching planning part. To be honest, manufacturing is also, we have contract manufacturers out there, so that is clearly also possible. Same with procurement, but I was thinking about the planning piece because that's kind of intellectual stimulating, right? And this is something I feel we can really force a disruption, as Stephan said, if we significantly improve the quality. Just think about the discussion we had on ML, right? Machine learning, where we would have then a group of people that would prepare the forecast and would then make sure that this is embedded into the end-to-end planning and execution process, and it's just working. So you could even then think about how would such a model work in terms of pricing. So how would you charge for operating the planning piece? It might be that you say that, hey, every order that we deliver on time, you pay for. Every order that we do not deliver on time, you don't pay for, right, for the planning service. So there is clearly something that needs to be defined. We need to have clear service level agreements that we are measured on, but then we execute according to those service level agreements, right? Maybe one thought that it's super important, and this is the same if we outsource kind of a physical flow. We need to make sure that we clearly understand what we are what we are asking to provide as a service. So there is clearly a big chunk of the processes, planning, order management, and so on, that can be automated these days, right? So is that something that we want to have as a service? Probably not. So we want to first automate, and then we want to make sure that in the second step, we then start to ask a provider to provide this as a service.
I'll just quickly take this because I think it's Gabriela commented. Fundamentally, still it boils down to data. Whether you manage to do it as a service or not. I mean, if you need to have good data, right? So Gabriela is coming from the perspective that most data is bad. I mean, I think we all agreed on that, and it might be good to understand how many companies have good data, meaning to say regular quantity data reporting, governance, and so on, because even that is mostly not on time, is not accurate, is not to the day. So let's open up this as well.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that, actually, all the big companies, right, have excellent data. What they don't have is information and insights, right? Because if you think about it, all the data is there. So, okay, you can argue that, hey, the lead times that I have in my ERP are very inaccurate. But it's easy to solve that, right? By reading transactional data, potential real-time data sources, and applying algorithms. You can say, look, I don't have good data on the drivers of demand, but have you identified them and how are you collecting them? Very often the supply chain would complain that there is no data, but the moment you talk to the commercial organization, right, there's a lot of data available, but the data is at different levels, right? There is a lot of data. It's, some data is mature, some data is not mature, some data is low frequency, some is high frequency, and the list continues. The data is not the problem. That's what we are seeing. The problem is, right, that organizations have not really figured out how to turn the data into insights. So what we are seeing is you have data lakes, right? A data lake is, just a lot of data all together. But the question is, what do you do with that data? And I think that is where, companies are still not making the right decisions, right? They are not able to turn the data into knowledge and then, apply the different analytics and planning processes that we have been discussing. And I think that is it that we need to solve for. And I think with this, supply chain planning as a service, that is a service by itself that we would start with anyhow, because that is critical to then deliver the results that we want to deliver. But Knut, happy to get your thoughts on that on the data point.
Fully agree on data is available. We like insights. And even if data is is not available, it's interesting that all this data, this master data topic, is something that is kind of the most unsexy topic of the world, and that's why no one wants to work on it, right? And that's why everyone is keeping complaining, right? And nothing is moving, right? So and this is clearly a way to improve, because if you see that, hey, you need to kind of make sense out of your data. To improve your planning, then you start doing it. Then you start to analyze it. So it's a super important topic.
So Stephan, why doesn't O9 start doing planning as a service?
I mean, we offer that, right? And that's a discussion we are having with Knut, right? How can we make that more compelling and actually put that out there in the market? But also what we really need, right, is companies that would like to test this. And, it's very easy to test it, right? You say, for a particular market, right, just take one market, right, and try it, right? You can even do it in parallel for a while so that you can start comparing results. But yeah, I'm pretty positive, right, that you can get amazing results, because we discussed it today. The data problem is not being solved fast enough by organizations. They're still very much planning in silos and looking into the rear view mirror. And then let's say that they have solved one problem. Let's say they have solved the demand problem. Rather, what we are seeing all the time, the demand forecast gets submitted, supply planners get it, they start second guessing the forecast, right? Starting to make their own assumptions, changing the data. And again, right, there is that disconnect between demand and supply, and you're in trouble from that moment onwards. So yes, we absolutely are going to offer this, and I think advertise that more aggressively. And that's something that Knut and I are passionate about it. And everyone that's listening in, and you think it's a good concept, let us know, because we are serious about this.
Exactly, and if I look into whenever we enter a client where we have really troubles in delivery, performance, availability, and so on, it's something where we then take over control, right? And that is basically operating this model, right? And if you now think about this not only in an emergency situation, but also in a regular situation, then taking over control to stabilize and to improve planning significantly clearly makes a lot of sense. So I fully agree with Stephan.
Well, there's a lot of comments on the feed. I'll take you separately. So maybe you can find some people to experiment on this. Look, I mean, I think it's worth a shot. I remember maybe 2-3 years ago, a large appliances company client of ours acquired for multi-billion-dollar deal, actually, a company that was making some sort of kitchen robots. 200 people. They literally had 200 people. So they paid billions. It's kind of a WhatsApp story all over again, right? So they paid 2-3 billion for a 200 people operation. Basically, all the guys had was engineering and the product patent or whatever you call that, right? And marketing. That's all they had. Everything else was outsourced. So they were making the robots. Everything was contract manufacturing. Everything else was outsourced. They only basically held on to the patent and to the brand, right? To the brand sales marketing channels. And that big company bought them for billions. And also to learn from them the model of how are you able to do this in such a streamlined way, whereas we are, been doing it for 50, 60 years, but we have our own plants and our own factories and our own distribution channels and all of that, right? So quite a fascinating story. Anyways, I won't advertise for anybody, so I won't share the names, but I found that fascinating. In some ways, it kind of plays into your narrative potentially as well, I guess.
Yeah, I think Radu, the thing is that we are seeing, right? So take any company, right? A lot of them are looking into, upgrading planning capabilities. But what we often find is they're trying to replicate what they are doing today, but they just want to do it with new technology. But that is, part of the problem, right? It's like there's so much change management that's required at large organizations, right? There's so much, new processes that need to be rolled out. There's the adoption to new technology. I mean, it's a big problem, right? So the ability to get that as a service, we believe is very, very attractive. But also then that service provider, right, is way faster, right, to putting, let's say, the basics in place, right? Demand, supply, S&OP, integrating everything, running the scenarios, providing the insights to the organization. That means that you can then accelerate sort of on the maturity curve, right? So we talked about those use cases when we get real-time data from, medical machines that are in hospitals. So now we can start rethinking how we do the replenishment to the hospitals. We might be getting, real-time data from our customers and consumers and can start rethinking how we start shaping demand and improving revenue. We most likely will get real-time data from, factories, digital factories, real-time track and trace from shipment providers, connected warehouses, and so forth. So again, we see, new type of use cases. And I think that is interesting that you get sort of the basics as a service, but then you can actually accelerate the journey, right, towards, I would say, truly next generation planning. And making use of all those data sources that you have access to, but simply are not used at all. And I think that is a truly missed opportunity by organizations, that they're not using any of that.
Let me build on this. I think speed is of the essence. So if you think again about you want to drive, I want to drive to Amsterdam, right? And I don't know how to drive. So would I then take driver's lessons? Right. So would I build up my planning capabilities? Would I then buy a car? And then after I got my driver's license and then go into that car and then drive to Amsterdam? No, probably not. Very clearly not. So if there's companies out there where kind of all this planning stuff is not really working, you can clearly go the path that we need to build up our skills, right? We need to change the way we operate. We need to make sure that we have the right backbone in place. We need to install an O9 system. We need to train our people. And then after a couple of months or sometimes years, depending on the skills, you then have the results. Why not saying that, hey, this is what we have, open up the system. We bring in experienced planners. We have something as an IT system in our backbone, so to say. So we come prepared, and we start immediately to have impact, right? Just think about the impact that is not in 12 months, but the impact is in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, right? Scaling up much faster impact, better availability, higher revenue. So that is a super interesting business case to fix something that is broken.
Agree. So I'm on that note, guys, we have a lot more questions coming in. I think I'll take you separately, but I'm just also being a little bit cognizant of time. I'm looking forward to see a first example. I think the moment you and again, one market is good enough. I think as long as you start having some comparisons, then it can become quite clear. obvious. Ultimately we are driven by data sometimes, mostly by emotions, but sometimes by data. And I'm definitely looking forward to this. I'm curious about it. So on that note, I want to thank both of you for your time, for coming today. I'll take you separately on all the many questions that came and that we maybe don't have time, including Stephan. Somebody was asking about your background in AI and machine learning because they're wanting to follow your paths. So I think you'll like that one. And stay healthy and see you very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Aldo. Hey, Knut.